Yeah, thanks, Chrissy, and thanks to Vertical Events. Always a great event, and what a great venue here in Perth. Perth's almost outdone itself with a venue like this, but great to be back and talking about Little Gem, Erebor, Jewel, and all the exciting things that are happening over in British Columbia. So with Blackstone, we think we are exploring one of the highest grade cobalt gold projects anywhere in the world, and in British Columbia, which is a Tier 1 first world jurisdiction for mining some of the biggest copper, gold and mines in the world in British Columbia nearby. So we've got a portfolio of international projects across Canada and Australia. Our focus is battery metals, cobalt and nickel, but also we have good exposure to gold, which is a great hedge through any cycle, and is also worth talking about, particularly with the capitulation of some of these battery metals equities. But we're definitely focused on battery metals, and we think that there's a long future ahead, particularly for cobalt, but also for nickel. So the BC Cobalt Belt is our flagship asset, and we'll be talking mainly about that today. We'll also talk about the Silver Swan South asset near Kalgoorlie, which we're looking for nickel sulfides and gold. The other two assets are lower priority, and we won't have time, unfortunately, today to talk too much about them. So in BC, we intersected some very high-grade cobalt and gold. It's an asset that was discovered in the 1930s. We think we have a belt-scale opportunity, 48 kilometres of a particular type of geology that has strong potential for a number of cobalt deposits throughout our belt. And it's the same geology as the Bouazir mine in Morocco, which has been mining cobalt for 75 years and still today is the only primary cobalt mine in the world, and has a head grade of 1% cobalt. Silver Swan South near Kalgoorlie, we'll talk a bit more about that, but that's also an emerging gold discovery as well as a nickel sulfide target that we'll be testing soon. The other Canadian asset is an early stage Voisey's Bay style exploration asset that came with the Little Gem acquisition, and the Middle Creek is up in the Pilbara near the Nullagine processing facility owned by Millennium Minerals, and that's a pure gold play, that one. Just a bit of a snapshot. As I said, most of our peers have similar chart around the same time as we did. The cobalt equities fell away. That was the time that we were drilling out at Little Gem, and the drilling unfortunately didn't show any size that we expected. We expected something that we could potentially mine, but we'll see soon that the Little Gem unfortunately lived up to its namesake and was too small to be a mine. We have a strong position from the board and management of 26%. The other two large shareholders are the vendors of that Little Gem asset, which has now become the BC Cobalt Belt. We had 1.25 million at the end of the quarter. That gives us enough cash to be able to explore a little bit further before we need to go back to the market. Very tight capital structure, only 96 million shares on issue. This is the board and management team. We have a strong technical capability. Hamish Halliday and Steve Parsons have been working together as a partnership for the last 20 years, and they've taken many companies from very small junior explorers into very large companies with big multi-million ounce discoveries in West Africa, and there's this history of corporate success and adding shareholder value through exploration. Steve's currently having some success with a company called Bellevue Gold Limited. BGL is the ticker. So that's another example of taking an asset and moving it forward through exploration and adding significant shareholder wealth. We're hoping that the BC Cobalt Belt is the next stage in this story. We have we have a number of geologists and technical people. We also have some financial accountants to keep the books in order. But most importantly, Dr. Stuart Owen down the bottom, he's one of the better geologists I've ever worked with, PhD in geology, and yeah, he's the one that no one gets to see. We leave him out in the wilderness, cracking rocks, but he's really the driving force behind all this success over many years. So this is the BC Cobalt project. So the Little Gem, which was the first target, that was actually discovered in the 1930s. They did 3 adits, and they mined very high-grade cobalt and gold in those adits. We drilled around those adits. We hit very high grades as well. Unfortunately, the drilling just lacked scale, so it was there's not enough size there for us to move forward with an underground mine. There's other targets, the Little Gem. We've got the Roxy, Erebor and Jewel prospects, and we'll talk a little bit more about them. So we're just out of Vancouver, so it's an old gold mining district called Braylon, and they've mined 4.4 million ounces of gold 15 kilometres away. So it's a very rich mineral field, and it's only ever been explored for gold. And as you can see here, there's very good cobalt numbers with the gold. So it was the cobalt that brought us here. We don't shy away from those gold numbers as well. They're great gold numbers even without the cobalt. So this was our first drilling, and we did hit these similar numbers. So we're hitting sort of 1% cobalt, multiple ounce per tonne gold. Unfortunately, that just it lacked the scale and size for us to move this one forward. That was the first target. And then we did 11 or 12 holes. We gave it a fair go. Unfortunately, yeah, we have to move on from this target, and we'll show you why. So that's a plan view across the Little Gem. You can see the adits that we've tested. So the old timers back in the 1930s, they did a little bit of work. We tested around it, and unfortunately, it didn't come up. So that Little Gem sits here. We've now made a new discovery called Erebor. I think I've never watched the movie where it comes from, but I think it's a New Zealand type movie. We have a lot of New Zealand geologists, so expect more Erebor type names coming. It's a cobalt gold target. It's very high grade cobalt, and it's nearby Little Gem. So that was visible gold at surface. These ore systems are outcropping. They've never been explored for cobalt, and this is the first discovery of cobalt outside Little Gem since the 1930s. And the only reason we've been able to do that is because we're the first group that's actually gone in here looking for cobalt. We've made 2 discoveries, Roxy and Erebor, in the first 12 months, and we're looking to make many more. You can see the outline of the IP survey that we were doing as this discovery was made. So we've done an IP survey along the Little Gem trend, which is this 2-kilometre trend here, and the Jewel trend, which is the contact between the serpentinized ultramafic and the quartz diorite, which is a really important geological contact. This is what we got from the IP survey. So clearly we've got some very large sulfide-bearing bodies that need to be tested. So the Little Gem drilling is through this area, and along strike we have a decent IP anomaly there, but surprisingly for us, this larger anomaly here could be the source of all this high-grade mineralisation. This is a large anomaly, over 1.5 kilometres long. This is a very large system, and has surprised us. From what we first thought, this is a much larger system, and very excited to test some of these anomalies. So this is a long section across the Little Gem trend. So that's that IP anomaly nearby Little Gem, but also nearby Erebor. So that's a very high priority target. So this is the Little Gem trend. this is what it looks like along the Joule trend. So clearly the Joule system is potentially the source of where this mineralisation is coming from. This is a very large sulphide-bearing system, and the Joule mine was mined multiple ounces per tonne with some copper, and we've had rock chips of up to plus 5% copper on surface. So this is, we think, a very large copper, gold, cobalt bearing system, and within the next few drill holes, very quickly we'll know whether this could potentially be something that's world class. And the reason we think it has that potential is some of the largest copper gold porphyry systems in the world exist nearby in British Columbia. So this is what we did after the IP. We've got some copper in soil. So this is our soil anomaly. It sits very much coincident with the IP anomaly. So we've got strong copper in soils, up to 5% copper in rocks, and almost perfectly coinciding with that IP anomaly, as is the cobalt. Interestingly, the cobalt around Little Gem is actually not as significant as the cobalt we're seeing at the Joule system. So we have cobalt, copper, and we also have gold. So this Joule target is clearly a target that needs to be tested as soon as possible, and a very large target that almost we didn't expect to be as large as it is. We knew there must be a source to this mineralisation, and now we know that it's probably coming from that Joule system. So that area we were just looking at is just to the north of our package, through this area here. We've also got 48 kilometres of that same geology that's never been tested for cobalt. So this is a geology that is analogous to the Williamson mine in Morocco. So they've been mining cobalt for 75 years, and they've mined over 50 different cobalt deposits, and they still today are the only primary cobalt mine in the world. And it's this particular geological contact, which is the serpentinite contact of the quartz diorite, which we spoke of, is exactly the same contact where the Joule system sits to the north. So what we have is all of that particular geology that's in Morocco. This is the Morocco setting. We have the same geology all through our belt, and we have 48 kilometres of that particular geology. This is a district that's only ever been explored for gold. 4.4 million ounces of gold have been mined and never been explored for cobalt. So this is Morocco. They have 50 kilometres, 50 different deposits. We have 48 kilometres. We have gold occurrences all through this belt that have never been tested for or assayed for cobalt. So we think there's an opportunity where there's multiple deposits throughout this belt. We've obviously got a great start up to the north with Little Gem, Joule, Erebor through that region, and now it's time to look through that whole belt for further occurrences of cobalt. This is our West Australian asset, and now that the season's changing, we'll move our focus over to Western Australia. We're along strike of the Annabelle gold mine. That's plus 5 million ounce, one of Australia's best underground gold mines, currently owned by Northern Star. We have an emerging gold discovery there. We've hit 10 metres at 3, and very similar to the discovery holes at Annabelle. You can see the bottom of hole air core drilling signature is also very similar to the size of the Annabelle system. So this is begging for some deep diamond holes, and we'll do that over the summer. The reason we actually picked this ground up nearly 5 years ago now is we actually like the nickel potential. This is an area that's had a lot of focus for gold, but has never been explored properly for nickel. So we have nickel, copper, PGEs, cobalt and arsenic, which suggests we have a nickel sulphide bearing system. We have 10 kilometres of ultramafic package, and we're 10 kilometres from the Silver Swan mine, which was a 10% nickel mine in its day, and one of the better nickel mines around Kalgoorlie. So we'll test these two nickel targets over the summer as well, and we're looking forward to hopefully hitting some nickel sulphides and potentially nickel massive sulphides, which will give us those very high grades. So in summary, we think we have one of the highest grade cobalt gold projects in the world. We're in a first world tier 1 mining jurisdiction. those historic results were confirmed with our first drilling. That first target, called Little Gem, unfortunately lacked the size that we need to build a mine, and we did some IP surveys, and we clearly have a large target that could potentially add scale and could be a source of cobalt for many, many years. We're in a geological setting that's the same as the Moroccan mine, in the Bouazir mine in Morocco. We believe we have 48 kilometres of that particular geology. We have exposure to nickel and gold through our West Australian assets, but most importantly, we have a team that has done this many times before, taking small companies through exploration success, making them much larger companies, and through corporate success, adding shareholder value along the way. So hopefully the BC Cobalt Belt or the Silver Swan South nickel or gold could be the next stage in that story. Thank you.